start this community call. We have our agenda doc over here. I'll link it in the chat. Feel free to add anything you'd like to it. And if there are no community concerns or questions, we will. We have plenty to talk about on our end, so we'll just kind of fill it out as we go along.
Will the agenda doc also be linked in the YouTube description?
I have no idea. We should ask Richie about that. I guess so. He does a good job of like spreading this document and letting other, tweeting it and putting it places. So I imagine he would add it there. But if he doesn't, then he doesn't. We'll poke him about it for sure. Cool. I guess we should start with, we have a new team member, Mario.
Yay.
Mario Rodriguez. Mario, you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Yeah, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, I'm Mario. I'm the latest addition to the Tempo team at Grafana. My previous experience has been mostly building distributed systems. Yeah, and I believe observability and therefore tracing it's fundamental to building and operating those systems. So I'm really excited to join this project. I think distributed tracing is a really fun field right now, and there are a lot of challenges to make things easier for the user. I think accessibility is really important, and I believe Tempo goes in that direction. So yeah, really looking forward to form part of the project and the community.
Awesome. Mario just started at the beginning of this week, I believe.
Yep.
So he's still doing his onboarding stuff. I'd also like to note that yesterday was Mario Day, named after, well, Mario Rodriguez, of course.
Yeah, I think that's correct.
Cool. So since our last meeting, we have released 060, I think actually shortly after our last meeting. And we'll probably go ahead and say 070 is coming soon. What was new in 060? I should go look at the change log and maybe say a few things there. I think we had a couple of cool features there. We added the force path style in S3 and some better S3 configuration options. We added per tenant block retention. That's good for us. If you're running a multi-tenant Tempo cluster, that's very helpful. If you're not, then it doesn't do much for you. I thought we added something pretty major there, but I guess not. It must have been 050 where we added stuff. We added Exhaustive Search, which is pretty cool because it'll handle longer traces better. And yeah, handful of things there. In 070, we have a number of improvements to search, to speed up search, including the recently merged change to add page-based index to, or access to the index file. Previously, we were loading the entire index at once, and for our larger blocks in the tens of millions of traces, we were seeing indexes upward of a meg, which just takes a while to pull off of GCS. So to reduce that, and also to reduce the total throughput needed for the queries, we made it so it would access it by page, and we have configured, I think, default at 250 kilobytes. So instead of pulling multiple megs, it'll be pulling 250K at a time. And so, right, I think it's kind of hard to tell when you do these changes immediately, the latency impact, because only the new blocks support it, the V2 blocks, which we just added. So as it's rolling out over the next 2 weeks internally, we'll kind of get a better feel for how much it improves with query speed. And I think we have maybe one or two other major kind of improvements there. Caching is one of those. I think Daniel wants to look at that pretty soon.
Yep, the idea is to use the macro cache that right now is in Cortex, that it uses like a pool. So yeah, it's going to improve a lot.
Yeah.
all the things with the caching.
Cool.
Yeah, the caching bit. So right now it's on like the hot path of querying. Every time we fetch a key from our backend and it's not in memcache, we actually write it as part of that query on the hot path to memcache. And sometimes write latencies to memcache just shoot up and we see like 200 milliseconds and it affects our query latencies. The background cache is supposed to handle all of this as a background process and like buffer writes in memory right in the background and supposed to be magic according to the Cortex team. And we believe so.
Great.
And yeah, Joe, you want to show us the latency improvements from the paged indexes? I think that graph is really cool to look at.
It could, I suppose. What's a good graph to show that on? The query front end here? Let me see.
Tempo reads. Yeah, the query front end on tempo reads.
Yeah, okay. Let me do that. Good idea. So let's see. This is present now. Boink. Window. This is our reads dashboard. This dashboard is available in the actual repo. It's under the kind of the tempo mixin, and then there's kind of a, which is all JSON-ed, and then there's like a generated version also sitting there. So anyone's welcome to kind of pull this and load it into Grafana. But this dashboard has a really nice overview of the read path in tempo. And this is the query front end, I believe. Yeah, it should be. Right, the query front end. So this kind of spiky, gorpy area is where I was actually doing the rollout and kind of reintroducing Vultr. We made some changes to Vultr. Daniel did actually. And so it was kind of down during this period, but once it came back, we're seeing, significantly improved read times with, I think there's kind of two changes that impacted that. One was the paged indexes. And then the other one was kind of, we reduced the size, or it's called the index downsample bytes, but the amount of like the range in the main data file that each index relates to. The idea here is generally to reduce the total megs per second into the queryers, because that is the bottleneck on querying right now, is they have to pull so much data to answer your questions. So these changes are designed to reduce that significantly. And then the kind of final change I have in mind, which is an adjustment to our bloom filters, and maybe should go in a couple weeks here, I'd say. That will, I think, do a really good job of allowing us to filter out more. Right now, our bloom filter false positive is 5%, which is way more than I'd like, but it keeps them small enough to load, basically. So we're going to make some changes that allow us to significantly reduce the number of blocks we have to load next. At that point, I'm going to feel pretty good, I feel like, about the KV store, and we're really going to be strong on what's next in tempo at that point. Cool. Oh, and somebody noted compression was released in 0.60, which is true and good news. That was maybe the big feature I was thinking of.
Right.
Compression, I think we're seeing like 6 to 7 to 1. Compression ratio on our blocks, which is an amazing cost savings, of course. It actually improved query speed as well. Again, kind of related to that whole idea of, even though it's extra CPU cost because we're having to decompress once we receive it, just reducing the amount of megs you have to pull from the backend is huge for reducing query time and reducing load on your queries. So both those changes kind of have been helpful in that area as well. The compression PR supports a whole bunch of different options, and we use Z standard, and I would call it, I wouldn't say the only supported option, but certainly the only one that's been kind of like proven operationally at scale. So there are other options there. I would stick to Z standard. It's the default. But if you do explore other options, feel free to kind of share with us the results.
Also, now that you mentioned it, like the Vultr, if someone is watching this, now the Vultr doesn't require Loki. So it's going to generate the traces for you and send it to tempo. So you don't need like a Loki instance, right? So yeah, for people to know if someone is using it, right? it's going to break.
Yeah, I remember someone was using it in public Slack, and
Yup, I should send him the pull request with the fixes for the Go routines. But yeah.
Right. Previously, it queried Loki, it did all this stuff, and the only thing you could really verify was whether the trace was there and if all of the like parent-child relationships matched up. Because we're actually creating the trace now, it's nice because you don't have a Loki dependency, and then also we can verify if the trace is actually correct in all of its features because we know what it should look like versus, just is the parent-child stuff set up right. Cool. And yes, somebody was looking to PR that to the Helm charts. So I gotta go deal with that. Speaking of Helm charts, we have Helm charts, hey, which is a new, that's right. That's right. We have new Helm charts available in, I'll put the repo in the doc, which is kind of a shared repo that all Grafana Helm charts are in. Oops, not Helm charts, Grafana Helm charts. And this shared repo has Grafana and Loki, and I don't know. I think that might be it. I don't think it has Cortex or anything like that, but it does have Grafana and Loki Helm charts in there. And I'll post this little snippet as well. So we've recently added both a distributed and a single binary version, and kind of, if you're into the Helm scene, kind of reduces the burden of deploying. And also I think it does a good job of highlighting kind of how we would deploy it. So, if you are going to deploy it totally different way or your way, these kind of documents, or this kind of work is helpful just to see what the relationships with Tempo are, how those services work together, how we set up the services in Kubernetes to help you, kind of set it up your way, I suppose. And this is huge. There we go. That's a little bit better. And we've had some good action on the Helm repo. A lot of help improving those. I basically run them and make sure they work in the most basic sense, but we have a lot of good community members keeping those up to date, adding new features, filing issues, and we've seen some good traction on the Helm charts. People like Helm. Cool. Two other things I wanted to highlight. I think these are my two favorite changes recently. Joe's corner. Favorite changes. This one Marty did, and I feel like I owe him a beer for this. Okay. This is, right. You can take me up on that? This is our dependency issues. This is working out our dependency issues and improving us to go 116. If I can type. And then the second one I wanted to highlight, because it was an ask from the community, and it was cool to get this one in, was multi-arch images. So we kind of have the setup for multi-arch images now. And if, I think we have ARM64 and AMD64. If you have other needs, we can add those, and it just kind of makes it a lot easier to do a Docker pull because, it will detect your architecture automatically and pull the right image. And so you don't have to, figure out which image to pull. It'll kind of do it for you. And also it makes it possible to run on ARM64 without recompiling. So previously you would have had to kind of do your own work to build it yourself, but now we have the Docker images for it. So these are, I think, probably by far and away ARM and AMD 64, the most common architectures. If any others are needed, just let us know and we'll see if we can support those as well. And then I owe Marty for this, for sure. This change was something that's been haunting me for like 6 months plus 9 months. I don't even know. But we just had the most awful vendor situation ever. We were like having to, basically the Open Telemetry team made their Gen Proto internal, and it just destroyed our vendor situation, and it made it very difficult to upgrade. There are a lot of like conflicting issues here. So Marty ironed it all out, and our vendor process actually works. Go mod vendor actually works in our repo where it didn't before. Go mod tidy works in our repo where it didn't before. So it's just a fantastic improvement.
Tidy-E actually for now.
Right. Oh, yeah. That was the 116 change, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, so I mean, there is a little bit of byte shuffling there to transition from one set of proto definitions to another, but in our internal testing and benchmarking, it didn't. The downside wasn't there, or the impact wasn't very bad at all. I mean, it was actually probably within the noise of any benchmarking in general. So I think it's good.
Cool.
Why do you also want to talk about the compression between agent and tempo?
Oh, sure. Actually, we should. Although, so this is not actually in tempo, but it is related to it in general. So this was something that we recently did. If you're using the Grafana agent, this would be important. So what's that?
I thought you were talking about that internal snappy stuff you did. You're talking about the Grafana agent gzip stuff. Go on.
Right. Yeah. So I'm not sure if it's been released, but in a recent commit, the Grafana agent was updated. So it internally is using the Open Telemetry collector to kind of provide that single, the multiple receivers and the single output stream of OTLP up to anywhere. So if you're using it on premise or Grafana Cloud. But that output stream was uncompressed, and so internally it supported compression. So it was a small change to Grafana agent to expose that setting. It is actually enabled by default, so it will do gzip compression for all of the egress now by default, but it can still be turned off if needed. Yeah, so the savings there are great. So I think we saw about 75% reduction in egress. So yeah, I can get a link to that.
I think I linked the PR.
Okay, cool.
Cool. And he also, Marty's been on compression lately, I guess, or we haven't generally, I suppose. We also enabled internal snappy compression right between the tempo components, which improved performance, I believe, as well.
Yeah, I think that went in.
It was in 0.6.
Oh, 0.6,
Okay.
okay.
Cool.
It's been longer than I thought. Cool.
Yeah. Another, please add this to your favorite changes, Joe.
Yes, sir.
We're finally dropping support for tempo query. We're deprecating tempo query.
Yes.
And now Grafana connects to tempo, and we can finally call it a real single binary deployment.
Yeah.
It's not single binary when you have two binaries, right? But now Grafana negotiates protobuf directly to tempo's query frontend, and we send out open telemetry batches, which are then translated into Jaeger batches on the Grafana side. And so we can now finally get rid of the tempo query container.
Cool. Yeah, I don't think this there's no changes to tempo on this, right? This is just Grafana supporting our actual query endpoint. Is that right?
Yes, okay. That's exactly right. Yep.
Cool. Do we have any idea what version that is? I know, I think Zoltan from the Grafana team added that support.
Yes, Zoltan added it. It'll be part of 7.5, which is going to be released next week, I think. Not super sure on timelines, but yeah.
That is incorrect. That was pushed out another week. Tentative date for the 7.5 stable release is March 23rd, but beta 2 will be around March 16th-ish.
Cool.
At current time, anyway.
Nice. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think the tempo team should start making promises about Grafana releases. Let's see if we can't get a couple dates for Grafana going in this channel.
Well, speaking of Grafana releases, I heard in an earlier meeting that you guys might be looking at adding support for the node graph to tempo, or an API change to support node graph and make tempo work happily with it. Is that true? Can you confirm?
There are kind of two developments in that world. One is I saw this, and I guess I'm not super familiar with the details, but somebody from the tempo team, the Grafana team, added support for a single request to draw a graph. So to draw a service graph, you do a request to tempo, you get your normal trace view, which shows all the spans, and it just uses those spans to build a service graph and show you kind of the relationships, between the services in that one query. I'm pretty sure I saw some work on that from Andre. And then secondly, We are talking about how to do kind of a metrics-based service graph, and we'll talk about maybe that. Well, we can kind of get to that in a second, but we have this idea for some next steps for Tempo. We're going to not in this call, but very soon share a roadmap, which will kind of set up some of the next features we want to add. And service graphs is on the internal list right now, and I expect it to make it to this roadmap, which would basically build a set of metrics over time, of course, right? And then we can build service graphs on top of those metrics. So the advantage here is you can look at a service graph at different points in time, and do like comparisons week over week or whatever by storing metrics in Cortex, basically. So I don't have a roadmap. I would like to have a roadmap, and we're working on that now for sure. And I do expect service graphs to be on there.
Hey, YouTube fans, if you're watching this later, and you are a fan of service graphs, leave us a comment. Let us know. We do pay attention to comments.
Yeah, why don't we just talk about some of these next ideas for Tempo? So service graphs, like we said, is kind of on this list. We also have this idea for what is kind of like an auto-indexing idea. So currently with Tempo, it's a key value store. If you've been using it, you're aware of this, and you log your trace IDs, and that kind of allows you to build your custom index, your own way of finding traces. We also have this upcoming exemplars feature that Marty is going to demo for us in a bit here. He's been working with the Prometheus team on getting that in. So there's the kind of two ways we envision people finding traces in Tempo for now. But we kind of recognize that this can be difficult, particularly in an environment where you have a huge number of microservices and you don't want to add this kind of logging or instrumentation everywhere. Or maybe, we all know that people are in situations where they have binaries they can't even recompile. They have other kind of situations where it's just it's too large of a cost. The barrier for entry is too large, I would say. And so we're kind of building this idea of doing this for you, probably in the agent, where the agent would just basically generate for you by analyzing the spans that are coming through, and build log lines, which it would push to Loki, and then let you automatically kind of index your traces and build some search around that, and add some common fields, of course, like the service names, namespaces, cluster names, latency, the kind of common things people are used to searching for. So we are looking at a way to basically build that for you by looking at the traces as they come through the agent. And we think it will help a lot of people adopt Tempo and kind of get on board without having to maybe make changes to applications that they already have and they've already instrumented. I think eventually, native support will come to Tempo, native search support, but we also see this as a valuable way to add support, or even just kind of more getting more value out of your tracing data with no cost to kind of the user. Like they can immediately begin using this without any changes, which is why we see the value here. Kind of on the same note, we are looking at ways to add metrics based on your kind of streaming metrics based on your spans, based on the trace data. There's an open telemetry collector processor that we want to make use of and improve that will watch spans and read their span names and other information out of the span, and then record latencies, histograms. And we'd like to add those features to Tempo by vendoring that and bringing it in. And there's also support in the open telemetry collector for tail-based sampling, and we want to explore that in the agent as well. So adding these features to the agent will allow more flexibility kind of in what it can do, what it can push into Grafana Cloud, and kind of how you can use Tempo. And that's kind of like, I would say, our short-term goals for Tempo and its relationship in Grafana Cloud and kind of its feature set and using it along with Grafana Cloud. And yeah, I'm working on the doc internally that kind of explains how we're going to do this and why we're doing it. As soon as that's together, I think we'll be able to share a roadmap because we'll have kind of an agreed upon set of features that we're going to move forward with. Cool.
Nice.
And I'm going to make Mario do all this too. I forgot to mention that.
No. We're all very excited to work on all those things.
We're very excited Mario's going to do it all for us.
Collective effort.
There we go. Right. Cool. Marty, do you want to do this exemplars demo?
Sure, yeah. All right. I think, I guess if it's okay, I will share a browser window and probably click around a bunch of different tabs.
Yeah.
That might be the easiest way to do it. Okay. I think this looks okay.
Yep.
Yep.
It's working.
Okay, cool. Okay, so I guess to preface this, this talk is kind of about exemplars, but also kind of maybe saying that the news is that to see them in action is pretty easy now with this TNS demo. So I will walk through that. But the idea, but to preface it also a little bit more is to say that exemplars are still very close, but they are not quite there yet. We're still waiting on a couple of pull requests to be merged, but it is very easy to see everything in action. And so that is what I will walk through. But I'm not sure it will look much different other than this specific repo here, which makes it easy. Cool. So
once
sorry,
those
yeah.
PRs are in, we'll have in-memory support for exemplars and Prometheus.
Right. So Prometheus would, yeah. Okay. Cool. So this demo here is called the TNS demo, and TNS stands for the new stack. And on this tab is kind of like what the demo actually is running. So this is just a toy application, which kind of looks like Hacker News. And you can click on things and things like that. And it's actually just a kind of a test ground to show all the different features of things that are demoable, like between the different tools. And because the applications are so simple, it's very easy to see what's going on and things like that. So to run it is very easy. So let's see, the easiest part to start is in the production Docker Compose folder. This setup should run out of the box. And it does currently use the Loki plugin for logs, but to see exemplars, that's actually not necessary. So with some small changes, you could, or if you already have that, it's very easy. But Docker Compose up will start the different applications and also Grafana with the built-in dashboard. And so there is a built-in load generator. So it will actually start generating its own traffic, which will start populating these graphs. So after some time, you should start seeing things like this. And so what's different here is that we have exemplars. So these three graphs are graphs of the different latencies for the application. And as part of the load generation and part of the application, they do kind of do some synthetic actions here. So for different failures and higher latency. And so the graphs will, without doing anything, there will be variations in traffic, which is helpful for seeing the different features. So just as a walkthrough, so this is a normal graph, but with the exemplars turned on. Each of these dots points to a trace which matches the different series for this graph. And so maybe down here on this bottom one, it's very easy to see how, oops, the exemplars are following along the histogram graph itself. And so when the graph is high, we can see the exemplars being plotted high that show that. And so for example here, so this one here, this value here is the latency. So that's 172 milliseconds. And it's being plotted right on the graph at 172. So it's easy to find a trace. And so we can click this button and view the trace.
Cool.
Yeah.
Something I noticed recently, if you go back, I don't know if this is in earlier versions of Grafana or is added recently, but if you mouse over an exemplar, it gives you the labels, which is kind of neat. So it'll show you the status code for that exemplar. Yeah, the route, I guess it's route here, but method, other kind of information, which I don't know if the old one did or not, but when I first noticed that, I thought it was really cool because you can kind of like mouse over a few, find the one that has the status code you want or the path or something, and then grab that one and use it to look up a trace.
Yep. So let's see, to walk through a couple of the other features that are going on here. So this demo is good because it has exemplars, but also because of the couple of other things that are going on. So this button here, I guess we would call this metrics to traces. So this is one workflow. So you have metrics, so we can get into the corresponding traces. Cool. So another feature here is traces to logs. So we can click the log button for a given trace, and it will find, based on the span, the time range, and also some other attributes that it will add here. So in this case, for that trace, there are certain attributes that it will pre-populate into the logs query. So here it's the job. So in this case, this is the container that was the load generation. These are the matching logs.
Cool.
Cool. Yeah. And let's see. Some other ones that we wanted to demo here.
I was trying to come up with this like clever way to think about metrics, logs, and traces, and that flow you just showed. And this is kind of what I was coming up with. The metrics tell us what is happening, right? They tell us how bad it's happening and kind of what is happening on our endpoints. The trace tells us where it's happening because you can zoom in on a specific process. You can see errors in a process and how that request propagated through your system. And then the logs tell you why it's happening. So you start with a metric, you see an error, then you look at the trace and you see what part of the trace is having issues in which process. And then you click on the logs and you can go see, memcache down or Redis didn't return a time or whatever, right? And you kind of start getting an idea of, the why for the question. So I've been really excited about that flow because I think that's going to be useful for everyone. Metrics, then traces, then logs. And I think we're going to be using it a lot internally as well.
Yeah, definitely. So there is a link here that I'd like to show about how actually the latency and exemplars are occurring under the hood. So this demo is using a Weaveworks endpoints, which are they're already instrumented to record the latency. That's where the metric comes from, but also the exemplar. So here, there are a couple lines here, and I guess everybody can see this okay. Yeah. So this is part of the Go SDK for Prometheus. And there is a new method introduced to use exemplars. It's called observe with exemplar. So in this case, the middleware is checking to see if the current trace is being sampled. And in this case, we're 100% sampled. And if it is, then it will call observe with exemplar with the trace ID that was extracted from the context. Otherwise, it will be the kind of normal metric with no exemplar.
Cool.
So cool.
So exemplar support is in Go and Python. And I know there's efforts to get it into other clients like Java. If you have interest in exemplars, if it's something that you think your company would use or you would use, then find your Open Metrics client, your Prometheus client, and we look for an issue related to it and thumbs it up. If there's no issues, file a new one. It'd be great to get some community kind of support for exemplars in these clients. So kind of like making the maintainer or letting the maintainers know this is a feature that's good for you or interesting to you.
Another interesting improvement I see is earlier the exemplars were only in the Explore view, and now they're in the dashboards.
Yes, correct. Yeah, so they now are on dashboards. Good, thanks. So another part about this is that they are on dashboards. But to point out, they do require the new type of time series panel as well. So these panels on the left are actually the previous graph panel. These ones on the right here have been updated to the latest time series. It's a little bit maybe harder to see here, but the crosshair here is a little bit different. So that's one way to tell. And if we were to edit one, and so exemplars are actually, there's a second step to enabling exemplars. Once you have the time series panel, there's a switch that's included, which turns on exemplars. So what I would do is I will hide these other ones so that we only see this top one.
Cool.
And the only difference is that it will actually make another call to the Prometheus backend to pull in the matching exemplars for that query.
Where's
So,
the
yeah.
new panel? Is it under visualization? Like,
Okay,
there are two
sure,
time series
yeah.
panels under there? I
Yes.
knew there was something to this. All right.
Yeah, so we'll walk through looking at one. So what we will do is, so this is the graph one that's the most popular. There's time series, so that's you have to
Beta.
switch to this one. Yeah, and I'm not sure about the compatibility. I mean, in my experience, it seems to work well. Yeah, you're right. It is labeled beta, but yeah.
I feel like
do you guys
beta's
want to
lost
know a little
meaning.
bit about that?
Sure.
Sure.
All right, so as you may or may not be aware, we have been transitioning all of our panels from Angular to React, I believe it was React to Angular. I think that everything's being moved to React. So the graph was the last one and is the last one that is still in Angular. It's got, for a long time, I think it was the only actual visualization that Grafana had. So people just kept packing functionality onto it. And so it's really like 3 or 4 different types of graphs all in one. So as we are rewriting the graph to React, we are actually breaking those out into separate types of graphs, which you'll see the rest of them coming soon in Grafana 8 in a few months. But time series is the first one. So eventually this one, a scatter plot graph, a bar chart, and maybe one other that I'm blanking on right now, will actually completely replace the graph panel. So basically all of the line time series charting has already been replaced and is in time series. You can actually convert your graphs to time series right now if you want to. There's a button in there. So basically this is time series is graphs bigger and better little brother. We have lots of documentation on how to use that if you want to take a look at the Grafana docs.
Cool.
You said there will be a button to upgrade all of the existing graph panels to time series?
It is in the panel editor, actually, of the...
Cool.
Yeah, so I
Get that
believe
button
that
live.
it's...
What's going to happen?
Yeah, I don't know if it's in this build.
I think it's down at the bottom. I'm not
What if you
positive.
just... Yeah.
I could be mistaken, but
Oh, cool.
anyway.
Yeah.
Ooh, node graph beta.
Ooh, node graph.
Yeah,
That's
node
nice.
graph. So I believe node graph and time series will both be coming out of beta in 8.0, but you know how it is, things are always subject to change. So, but I know that they will be updated in 8.0 because node graph has we've got some demos internally on some cool updates that are in the works for that.
Very cool.
Is this also the one with the real-time streaming panel? Is that the new time series panel? Does that have...
It does, actually. The time series does have that. You can take a look at that, how that looks in the 7.4 Grafana Play demo dashboard. Or I believe that it is already enabled in the test data DB. I don't know how to do it for a live one yet, but I think you can hook it up there somehow. It's all in alpha right now, so it's kind of in motion.
Sure.
Cool. Yeah, so there are a couple other things here that are part of this demo. This page, this is in the tempo repo, so it will, you can kind of walk through that, but like this log QLv2, this is a way to actually...
in the tempo repo?
Right.
I put it in the doc. If you look
example.
at the...
It's right there in the tempo repo.
Cool.
Oh, my bad.
Let's see. Yeah, so this is not really related to tracing, I guess, but it is a way to, for things that are, for log lines that include a trace ID and other parameters, it is something that makes it easy, I guess, this is another way to discover traces. Yes, let's go ahead and look at it. So in this case, the application is logging requests along with some other things, so including the status code and duration. And what we can do is actually run a query to discover them and then click the matching trace. So in this case, what we're looking for is any failed request. So a status code is anywhere in the 5xx range and a duration over 100 milliseconds. And so, once we find that, it includes the trace ID equals, we can click the button and go view the trace. So this demo, I guess, is good for seeing that another way to take your logs and discover a trace from them, especially if you have, meaningful values that are logged as well. And so I guess the magic here is piping it to the log format operator, which will process anything kind of like in this key equals value kind of format. So that's the log format.
It is called log format. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Let's see. I guess one more thing is I wanted to talk about just what's going on in here. So this is pre-release software, just to kind of point out there are a lot of moving parts. And we should, there was like a good blog post that was posted in the community Slack that I think was also a good write-up of all the different moving parts of exemplars. But just to walk through here, a couple things. So within this demo, there is a pre-release branch of Grafana being used. So I think this would work with maybe, I'm not sure with what images are available for the 7.5 branch, but because it's funny, like this pre-release actually does say 7.5 pre, so it's kind of funny.
I think 7.5 works.
Mm-hmm.
I think you could. Well, my bad. You're right. They haven't released 7.5 yet. The main branch has support for this.
7.5 beta is out.
Right. Okay.
And
my bad.
beta 1 is currently out and live in Grafana Play, and you can also install it if you want.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay.
Cool. And the other thing, it is running a custom Prometheus image. This is built off of the
Tom
pull
Wilkie
request.
Prometheus.
Yeah. This is built off of the pull request for the first phase of exemplar support. But even after it's merged, it will require this command line to be ran to enable it. So it will be an experimental feature called exemplar storage, and it will have to be enabled with this command line. Cool. Yeah, I think that's a good review of exemplars. Cool.
Yep. Yeah. So there's a link in the chat to what Marty was talking about, both to the original demo, which is Grafana TNS, as well as kind of the references to it from the Tempo repo, and you can kind of just with Docker Compose up play with all the stuff he was showing there, which is cool. Daniel, do you want to take this next section? This we kind of have the Python example you put together, as well as we have a bunch of guides if you want to talk through some of that.
Yeah, so I put up a small example using OpenTelemetry in Python with two small services, one OpenTelemetry collector and Tempo, right? So you can try it. It's very basic, but it's intended for beginners. I plan to inject some failures, clean the repo a bit, and write a blog post around that on how to troubleshoot that using Tempo, just to explain like the flow of certain things. On the document, there is like a link that Joe put for like, we have some other like examples using OpenTelemetry. There are like some blog posts for Java, Spring Boot, auto instrumentation, for Go, OpenMetrics exemplars, and for .NET. And also some community resources for Node.js and Java Spring. So if you build something around this, feel free to open a pull request and add the sample, because it will be very, very useful for the people.
Yeah. That's a good point. We do have a number of external links there to different people's GitHub repos who have kind of put some of these nicer examples together. So if you have something like this, if you have a repo that just shows off how to maybe use OpenTelemetry instrumentation, use it with Tempo, do something like this, we'd be glad to include that link in our docs. Feel free to submit a PR or contact us in the Slack and let us know. Cool. Yeah. Well, we have 11 minutes left. Does anybody have any questions? I'll link the main, have I done this recently? I'll link the main doc once more here at the bottom. This is just the community call document. If you'd like to add a question just to the document or an agenda item there, you're welcome to, or if you want to ask directly, that's also fine. And we can kind of maybe wrap up with a couple questions for people, or if not, we can do whatever.
We are the masters of doing whatever.
That's right. Cool. All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap up here. I'd like to thank people for showing up. And I think we had a good talk today, mainly kind of covered stuff that happened in 060. We talked a little about what 070 is coming out soon and kind of some neat things there. Helm charts are out. We overviewed some of these features. Next steps for Tempo are exciting, and we talked about that some. And then we got a good demo from Marty and some discussion from Daniel about some of these examples. Hopefully the examples hit some of the technologies you're using. And if not, then please let us know. We'd be glad to kind of whip something else up or whatever. Cool. All right, everybody take care. Please try to get a hold of us there's a public Slack. There's a community.grafana.com forum for Tempo. There's a lot of different ways to chat with us. If you're using Tempo and you have questions, or you just want to ask generally about the project, please jump in there and hit us with it, whatever you have, and we'd be glad to help. All right. All right, everybody take care.
Thanks.
See you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.